Welcome back to the 2021 Justin and Tyler Movie Awards, and we now conclude the people portion of the awards with our best directors of 2021. Same deal, 3 honorable mentions, number 3, number 2, and number 1. We'll kick things off with my 3 honorable mentions for Best Director of 2021. Those mentions go to Shaka King for Judas and the Black Messiah, go to Mike Mills for Come On, Come On, and to Zack Snyder for Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yay! Justice League.
Yeah,
Restore the Snyderverse.
Absolutely.
I feel like I gotta... But don't be a dink about it, people. My God. Like, do the hashtag, get the movement going, but don't, review bomb other movies or harass people.
There you go.
Just get them to restore the Snyderverse.
So, Shaka King for Judas and the Black Messiah. Apparently this is the first thing Shaka King has directed since, a 2017 short film or something.
Oh, really?
So then to come back, 3 years later and be able to show the expertise and poise to tell this story and tell it the way that they did, it made me forget that names like Ryan Coogler and F. Gary Gray were attached to this movie at one point. Coogler, I think, still produced it, but or had some significant role in the making of this movie, but was not the director. And I remember the first time I heard Ryan Coogler was involved, I was like, oh, why isn't Ryan Coogler directing it? I would have thought that would have been something for them. And then F. Gary Gray, who of course has done stuff that I've loved in the past. Yes. But Shaka King's particular direction made me forget that those names were attached, which is awesome. Mike Mills, Come On, Come On. This was an absolute passion project for them. They directed it. They wrote the screenplay. It's very much the story that Mike Mills wanted to tell. The movie's presented in black and white, which I'm just kind of a sucker for, and that's great. And then again, you get an actor like Joaquin Phoenix and the other performers that are in that movie together, and they play off of each other so well. The screenplay is incredible. The cinematography in that movie is really tremendous. So it was a really strong effort from a name that I really had not ever heard before. And Zack Snyder, I mean, what else can you say? There was obviously a lot of backlash, not against him for leaving the project, because obviously everybody understood.
Yeah, because if you were mad at him for that, it's
right.
Like, get out.
Exactly, it's like you're done. You're done. But still, there was just oh my God, what this movie could have been. And I say that as somebody that liked Justice League. I like the OG cut of Justice League. I had no problem with it.
You knuckled up.
Exactly.
And then I knuckled up.
There you go. So I had no problem with it. But then when I got to see Zack Snyder's vision for what he wanted that movie to be, and the fact that it was 4 hours, and not just everybody gets to step back in and say, oh, by the way, the entire universe wants to see the version of this movie that I wanted to make, and then get to do it, and it paid off in such a myriad of tremendous ways. So Zack Snyder, I really, genuinely, Zack Snyder should have made my top 3, but he's in there as an honorable mention at least.
All right, so my honorable mentions are Billy Piper for Rare Beasts, Denis Villeneuve for Dune, and Edgar Wright, mostly for Last Night in Soho, but also did the Sparks Brothers, which I find interesting because there's quite a few directors this year that could be body of work. And normally that doesn't happen because they make one movie a year.
Right.
All right, I won't spend too much time on these, but Billy Piper basically made an anti-rom-com that outright destroys the formula of the rom-com. And the problems in the movie are from the writing, which I actually think she did, but that's not directing. She uses audio well, it's visually interesting, there's some really great scenes, and she uses perspective and different angles, like a first-person view at an especially potent scene really well. So yeah, so she was good in that, or good for that. With Villeneuve, look, it's Villeneuve, right? It's gorgeous.
If you've watched our awards before, that's almost everything we need to say.
Yeah, I mean, normally he's top 3 for me when he does a movie, but I mean, look, the guy makes beautiful movies. I don't know if I've said it on video before, but I think he might be the best Canadian director ever. I'm saying ever.
Yeah.
I don't even care. I'm going in on that. You know, Dune looked gorgeous, and that's what this is about, right? The directing.
Good.
And then Edgar Wright, I mean, for Last Night in Soho, it reminded me of the movie Suspiria, which, the original,
Yeah.
not the remake. It's not as good as Suspiria, because Suspiria is one of the all-time great horror movies, but the way he used color, the way he uses music, the way that he makes normal scenes look interesting, like even walking down some stairs and you see like Anya Taylor-Joy in the mirrors and stuff. Like just it's gorgeous. It's such a feast for the eyes. That really, I don't know, like if I could have predicted, as much as I like Edgar Wright, thinking that an Edgar Wright directorial effort is actually better than a Denis Villeneuve effort, but I think it is. And plus the Sparks brothers, it was a documentary, but he did inject some of his own style and energy into it, so that helps him get on. It's not enough to get to the top 3, but I gotta show a lot of love for Edgar Wright. He made one of his best movies of all time this year, and he made a really good one on top of that, which I liked. I even like Sparks Brothers more than Baby Driver.
Ooh. My number 3 best director of 2021 is Wes Anderson for The French Dispatch. And I'm not the world's biggest mark for Wes Anderson, but I enjoy Wes Anderson's movies, and I enjoy the for lack of a better term, formula, but like the ingredients that make a Wes Anderson movie. And this is very much kudos to Wes Anderson for making another really great Wes Anderson movie, right? He seamlessly weaves together 4 different storylines, basically, in The French Dispatch, with a massive ensemble cast that he gets incredible performances out of. It's all filmed very, very beautifully, and I loved the subtle instances when it goes from black and white to color, and it draws your attention to that scene, and then it goes almost immediately back to black and white. And that was just one of those little, like a little thing, a little directorial trick, mind you, to kind of refresh your audience's attention almost. I really enjoyed The French Dispatch, obviously, and like I say, I enjoy Wes Anderson movies, and it was enough for me to give him number 3.
He always gets called quirky.
Yes.
And I think, for me, not that I've seen a ton of his movies, actually, but for me, I think his formula has worked better for me in the animated sphere. Okay, my number 3 is Park Hoon-jung for Night in Paradise. It's mostly a drama. Now it's about, like, violent criminals. But it is, the violence is really, like, blunt and impactful and choreographed well when it happens. But it is a beautifully shot movie with excellent usage of space. Like, there's a scene where the 2 characters are in the same building, but they're in different rooms, and the way the camera's out and it shows both. It's just like, it's not like the most original thing you've ever seen, but it's done really well. There was this old cliche when people used to describe metal on forums. I used to go to like, it's brutal but beautiful, so we always used to kind of scoff that because it was like so cliche. But it is. This is what I have to fall back on. It was brutal and beautiful at the same time, and it juggled both really well. So yeah, so my number 3 is Park Hoon-jung for Night in Paradise.
Very interesting. You're going all around the world for your choices.
I always do.
It's great.
I can in real life, so I mean, I wouldn't anyway.
That's because there's a pandemic, and
You
we
didn't
don't
know.
have money. My number 2 best director of 2021 is Edgar Wright for Last Night in Soho. Now, I was not able, unfortunately, to see the other one there that he did. I was looking for it through the various completely legal methods that I look for movies, and wasn't able to find it, so it just didn't get in enough time. That certainly would have contributed to things. Look, Edgar Wright is very quickly did become one of my favorite filmmakers, and I think he is in a very, very, very select list. It's a very small list at the very highest echelon of directors for me. And again, it's the way he used his particular, you used a couple of great words for it, like his particular style, his particular energy, which I think is an excellent way to frame the way he makes his movies, into telling this dual world story of Soho in a, for lack of a better term, modern day, and then the Soho of the swinging 60s. And just the way that he sort of tells both of those, the way one world is wild and flashy colors and the other world is kind of subdued a little bit almost. It's darker tones, and I can't imagine that is anything but 100% intentional. And the way he uses music, which he's used music better in movies than he did in Soho, but he uses the music incredibly well, gets excellent performances out of a cast that are not household names. Like Anya Taylor-Joy is getting there. Yeah. Thomasin McKenzie certainly is not. No. And there's just not, it's, despite not having real household names in this cast, it's a tremendous performance across the board. Edgar Wright winds up my number 2.
So something that we don't always mention when it comes to directors, because we always mention like visually and all that stuff. But I guess you said you got great performances from these people, so I guess you already mentioned it. But I did want to say something about the great performances that Edgar Wright was able to get out. Like, there was this Ingrid Bergman movie called Autumn Sonata, which I've said is maybe the best 1-2 punch of like female acting in cinema history, because it's Ingrid Bergman and Liv Ullmann, legends in their own right, like playing off each other. And I'm not gonna say that Mackenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy are at that level, but it reminded me of it. Like, I was watching it, I was like, man, this might be one of the best 1-2 punches of female acting, like, playing off of each other in the last, like 5 years.
Right.
Right? Like, they were so good together that the fact that I even, like, thought of a Bergman movie, right?
Right.
And thought, obviously it's not Autumn Sonata, which is one of the great films of all time, I think. But I wanted to shower some more praise on them.
And it's also like it's a more difficult performance because it's not like they're usually interacting with each other directly. Yeah. A lot of it is Thomasin McKenzie reacting to what's happening, and yet they still have that chemistry of playing off of each other. So I don't know. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Okay, my number 2 is Michael Sarnowski for Pig. I've got a few things to say. I'm gonna get in the weeds here in a sec, but I do want to say if you are like, what's an artsy movie, then this pretty much is what you might imagine. Like, it's pretty conventionally artsy, shots linger a little bit longer. There's some really pretty music. He'll zoom out to show, more of the environment, even though like a lot of people might keep it more closed in or whatever. But there's something I want to call special attention to as a director, specifically in how he dealt with audio. And how it relates to the character. So the pig is only, spoilers, the pig is only in the movie for a very short period of time. It's basically, it gets stolen away from within like, I don't know, the first 10, 15 minutes of the movie, okay?
Okay.
But from the moment that the movie starts, there might only be like a minute, maybe 30 seconds of time where the pig isn't present at some point. Either whether the pig is actually on screen, or you just hear his snorting.
Oh.
And when I wrote a review, I called attention specifically to the power of the snort. Because I think, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think that this movie actually did more to build a relationship between Nicolas Cage and this pig that he loved, using audio and making the pig feel ever present in this character's life, using audio. Because the pig was always there. Like, I listened with headphones, so maybe I noticed it more. And it really resonated with me. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'm just noticing something that isn't there. The credits roll. And what do you hear after the credits are done? You hear some nature, of course, but then you hear the fucking snort, right?
Okay.
So he begins and ends the movies with, like, snorting in the pig. Like, I think it's intentional. Because why else would he put the snort at the end? Like, having the pig just... You know what I mean? Because it was this movie about a character that loved his pig. And I just felt like, even though the pig wasn't on screen for most of the movie, he built that relationship so well with audio.
Wow.
And that was maybe my most interesting observation I made about a movie this year, because I never saw many people talking about it, and maybe I'm overthinking it. But it worked. I think there's a compelling argument there, and I'm gonna leave it at that because it's a beautiful movie visually as well, but it was the audio, specifically in the first little bit and then right at the end that really connected it all together for me.
Oh, that's very cool.
So there you go, Michael Sarnowski for Pig.
My number one best director of 2021. It's Denis Villeneuve for Dune.
Denis Villeneuve.
I mean, come on. This is the least surprising award I will give all year. And look, they said my boy couldn't do it with Blade Runner. And then he went and he said, okay, bet. And he did it. You had to watch it twice, and I think both of our opinions, you had to watch that movie twice. But after the second time, you're like, okay, cool. He did what people said you probably couldn't do.
See, looking back, I gave Logan my number one movie, but
Right.
looking back, I should have given it to Blade Runner.
Right.
Because that's the movie I think about the most.
Right.
Like,
And then they've been saying since, what, the 80s? You can't make a good Dune movie. And he was like, okay, bet. I've wanted to make this movie since I was 9. And then he said, okay, cool. I'm going to make a Dune movie. And he made a Dune movie, and the Dune movie was frigging brilliant. The size and the scope of it is massive. He builds these worlds from scratch, and every element of that movie, I think, falls together into the best directorial performance of the year. Denis Villeneuve is my number one. Canadian. It should surprise exactly no one if you've ever watched these before.
Yeah, he's another movie award darling. Like, and I'm completely okay with it. I mean, he was on my list in the honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good pick. I already said all I needed to say.
Yeah. Well, 2 of your honorable mentions were my number one and my number two. And that's a reflection of the fact that he's on twice as many movies as I did.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so my number one is Zack Snyder for Justice League and Army of the Dead.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Because he did a body of work thing.
Right.
Now, Justice League probably would have been enough. But having that second movie is kind of what tipped it over Pig for me.
Absolutely.
Look, this is just Zack Snyder things, right? You either love his style or you don't. He's going to have a lot of slow-mo. Most of the time it's okay, except for 300. And, yeah, he'll do lots of slow-mo. Things will feel big. Excellent use of music, great cinematography. He has his dark atmosphere style. If you don't like those types of movies, you're never gonna really like Zack Snyder. He's like, and Justice League is like art house meets superhero, and some people don't want that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just wish that his movies weren't buried because of that.
Right.
I wish he would have, been able to see his vision out more. And Army of the Dead is not as good. It's not among my favorite Snyder movies, I don't think. I became a Zack Snyder mark, apparently, at some point. Like, it took me a few years, and then I look back at all the movies I rated his, I'm like, I really like almost all his movies.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a Zack Snyder mark, apparently. And that just helped. Yeah, Army of the Dead was a really entertaining movie. I know some people were weirded out by his camera choice, because he used, like, an old camera. That gave some things like a blurry. It was an interesting stylistic choice. I probably wouldn't have made that, but he still handled that material well. But yeah, mostly it's for Justice League. I mean, 4 hours of just gorgeous, dark imagery, cool fight scenes, and all that stuff. Anyway, we're talking about the directing. So yeah, my number one is Zack Snyder.
Well, and here's something that I think can be brought up as well. Like at one point, I think Snyder was really committed to the idea that his Justice League was going to be a 6-part miniseries, and basically crafted that as a 6-part miniseries, because you've got your 6 chapters and then your epilogue. So he basically went about crafting it that way. And then the studio says, well, we don't want to do that because it's going to either mess with the marketability or whatever. We don't want to do it that way. So he said, all right, I'm still going to do it that way, but you're going to get what you want, which is a singular vision, like a singular element. Yeah, I mean, I love the way that movie is laid out. And even though it is a movie that we already saw, quote unquote,
not really, because there's a whole other
exactly. There's so much
that we haven't seen.
There was so much added material, but it was far enough away from OG Justice League that it's felt familiar, but it also still felt very fresh.
Feels nice to give Zack Snyder. I think Nicolas Cage and Zack Snyder. There's a certain group of the internet that loves me, and there's a certain group of the internet that despises me.
The second segment is much larger than the first. And with that, the People Awards come to a close with Denis Villeneuve and Zack Snyder winning our #1 Best Directors of 2021. Now we move on to what I often lovingly dub our co-main event, which is our top 5 worst movies of 2021. And usually at this point in the recording process, as the fatigue is starting to set in, it makes it so much easier to just sit back and go, let me tell you why this movie sucks. And that is what the next video is going to comprise. You're going to learn about at least 10 movies plus some honorable mentions that really, really suck. So swing back around to our next video. That's what's coming. Top 5 worst movies of 2021.
Thank you.